Hello and welcome. I always feel a little bit like Effie from the Hunger Games whenever I start one of these. I want to say welcome, welcome. Um, but hopefully, this doesn't feel nearly as daunting as the Hunger Games to you. My name is Julia Cafaro, and I am really excited to speak with you today about some of the ways that I have built up a culture that really fosters a lot of love for reading in the classroom every day. And just like everything that goes into that and the wonderful results that I've seen. So let's just dive right in because I know your time is precious. If you are somewhat new to me, I also, my store and my blog and everything else is called Around the World with Mrs. C. That is because I genuinely have such a love of world literature and mythology, because I love the idea of learning from all kinds of places and all kinds of people without having to even step outside of my house if I don't want to or if I can't. As a child, I was really poor growing up, and there just was not a lot of opportunity to travel anywhere. And reading for me, especially of far off places, was a way for me to kind of experience the world. I have been teaching for 8 years. I was a professional photographer for about 10 before that. Most of that has been in high school settings, but I also did teach for a year at an inner city middle school. So just so you know, I have had experiences with using this philosophy for pretty much 6th through 12th and had great results. I am a girl mom, but my daughter, even though she's precious because she's mine, um, she's also autistic, but she's dyslexic. So we had a strong resistance to reading, even here in our house for a little while, because it became very hard. So I even adopted what we were doing or what I was doing in the classroom a little bit here at home to help support her and to bring back that love of reading. So, again, these are things that I'm just really, really passionate about. And I'm an avid reader and book whisperer. And I feel like that is a big crux to creating this environment in which our students are really going to thrive and really be begging to read every single day. So I'll tell you a little bit about that too as we get on. So I told you that the name of this is We Read and We Don't Judge. This was actually inspired by We Listen and We Don't Judge. And if you are on social media, especially in the book world at all, this phrase has come up a lot in the last year. And I really loved this because it does just remind me so much of my independent reading philosophy of I don't want to police. I don't want to judge. I just want to inspire that love of reading for the sake of reading. Don't get me wrong, we do a whole lot of other, structured reading in which I guide them and we do things for classwork and things like that. But I also at the same time want them to read on their own. I want them to become readers. We definitely know that our country is seeing really horrible rates with literacy. And I'm just trying everything that I can to respark that love because it's not inherent in most of our students. Most of our students don't start out hating to read. So it's kind of just retriggering that. So, along with that, when I tell my students at the beginning of the year that we're going to be doing independent reading every single day, this is what I tell them. It's not that you hate reading. You hate that you have been told every day for years what to read, what to think about the reading. And if you thought differently, you're the problem. And to be fair, when my students hear that, they honestly kind of are taken aback at first because they honestly think I'm trying to trick them because their English teacher is telling them this. But to be honest, I got this idea, this epiphany from my own mother. Again, I grew up as a ferocious reader. I was consuming so many books a week. I would literally check out as many books as I was allowed at the library every week. But I asked my mother, I said, but I don't ever see you reading. How can I love this so much? And that, but you're not enjoying it too. And she even said, she was like, high school killed it for me. She was like, I read things, but if I didn't see it the exact same way my English teacher saw it, then I was stupid. And how could I not see this? It's so obvious and this and that. And she's like, and it just killed it for me. And she was like, because obviously I'm too stupid. So why would I bother? And I think that's kind of the effect that we have sometimes inadvertently. We often want our students to love what we're reading. That's why we're choosing to share it with them. But at the same time, we're never going to be in a perfect world where every single one of us is all loving the same thing for the exact same reasons. And that's always the gamble we take when we do a whole class text, right? We know that some are going to love it and some are going to hate it, no matter what. So this gives them that chance to every day read something that does spark something within them. And so let's talk about how I do this. So again, I told you this is every single day. I didn't start out that way. The first year or two, I tried to do a different kind of bell ringer every day. Like some days, like we had, what was it, Mindful Mondays, which I still do even with the independent reading, because Mindful Mondays is just like I put on like a 2-minute meditation or something, and we just kind of like breathe and we calm our minds. I would have Lit Term Tuesday. I would have Writing Wednesday and Fun Fact Friday, all kinds of things, But really about 2 years in is where I was like, you know what? I really just want the stability of the same thing every day. Plus, my district had made the choice that students would not read a whole class novel under any circumstances after 5th grade, which led to reading no novels. That's what it translated into. So I really wanted to shift it, and every single day now, we start out with 8 to 10 minutes because I teach in just your standard situation. Was it like Monday through Friday, 55 minutes, that sort of thing. If you're working in a block schedule, you might want to tweak that and do more like 10 or 15 minutes a day. So you got to just work with what's best. And I always found that 8 minutes, at least to start them the first few weeks, was kind of that sweet spot. It's not too long for kids who are literally relearning how to focus and read a book. But it's not so short that it diminishes the value of what we're doing. So 8 minutes at least. And then within a few weeks, they're honestly begging for more time. So if it's a light day, like, okay, I'll give them 15. If it's a day we really have to move on, be like, I'm sorry, guys, we'll try and fit in some more later in the week. We make room as much as we can. And I also would sit at the front of the room in my comfy little butterfly chair, and I read my book too. So, at the very least, they don't want to disrupt me while I'm reading, because, like I'm also reading for pleasure too. And also another really great tip is I do have a really nice in-class library. This was something I pieced together from Goodwill, from public library sales. Second and Charles always had a really nice free bin for a while, and I would pilfer from there. So, it wasn't like I spent a significant amount of money, but I had a really nice in-class library. And but I also made a point to make an appointment with the media center for every 2 weeks. This was for 2 reasons. One, it always just ensured that nobody ever forgot to renew their books and get a late charge, because then they are going to start getting annoyed with the whole reading thing if they have to start paying money. So I would do that, but I also would coordinate with the media center specialist as much as I could for any sort of like special things that we were looking for. So again, it just kind of re-solidified to my students that this was something that was really important. And, like every 2 weeks, we're going to make sure that you have access to all of the books But if you don't have your own book or your library book, just grab something from my shelf. I literally had everything, and I'll show you a little bit of that in just a second too. So when I talk about the whole we listen, we don't judge, again, I didn't really have any requirements for the most part. I just let them choose what it is they wanted to read. But I often found that I would have to guide them. Because again, a lot of my students came to me in 10th, 11th grade having not read a single book since around fourth grade. And so they genuinely just didn't even know where to start. They have no idea what they want to read. So sometimes it worked to just ask them, well, what do you like to watch on Netflix? What are you binge watching right now? What video games are you playing? Things like that. And then, if nothing came up that way, then I would ask them the question, be like, what is the last book that you remember loving? And I cannot tell you how many times, especially for boys, it ended up being Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So I would just tell them, why don't you start there? It's something that you loved. You already know it. You already know you're going to love it. So why don't you pick that up again? And so again, zero judgment. I don't care that they're picking up a book that is for like fourth and fifth grade, and yet they're 10th graders. Because to be honest, this is a muscle that has not been worked in so long, it's atrophied. This is going to be the least resistance. And it would just bring me so much joy to see them sitting there giggling away while rereading and reliving that joy of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And then, of course, because they are so much older, they're going through it much faster. They're building up steam. And then they're like, okay, I've read all of them again. Like, what can I read next? And then we would strategize with the media specialist as well. It was great. There were other things too, again, if they really love like the Vampire Diaries, watching that and be like, did you know there's a whole book series? And I had a couple of the books on the shelf there too, and they would like, oh, really? So often they don't even know that many of these things are adaptations. Even the Witcher games and the Witcher series that went on Netflix, those were adapted from books. I also had a whole bunch of manga, comic books, magazines, what have you. So it's always good to just kind of have that conversation to help steer them into something that they would probably like, because it already aligns with the other things that they like. So again, like I love to display some comic books. I had so many students who, when they walked in, they were in awe that I would display comic books. And I kind of understand, because I was this way even too, until probably about 15 years ago, where I had been kind of a book snob and kind of assumed that anything graphic novel or comic book related was stupid and juvenile and beneath me. But to be honest, when I finally got over myself, and I even read my first graphic novel for a college course, I discovered the depth that is there and the extra depth that you have by analyzing the art along with what is being said. So my students get really excited when they see that I have a bunch on display, and they even ask me, I'm like, can I read them? I was like, yes, that's why they're there. And I would change out this display. And then I had some more over on the counter as well. Now, I will give a slight word of caution here. When I say there's zero judgment, I don't mean I let them read just anything. And I would kind of give them the little caveat of being like, please just make sure it's school appropriate, or at the very least, it doesn't look outrageously inappropriate. And, again, I'm working with high schoolers, so they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I'm not here to trash anybody who likes the 50 Shades of Grey books, but, if admin walks in and they see my whole class is reading it, they're probably not going to be thrilled. And so, of course, they kind of know what these books are about, and so they kind of giggle like, oh, okay. But at the same time, if you are teaching younger students too, you may want to be sure you're extra checking on this. Um, Even with my 10th graders, if they had a Kindle and they would ask if they could bring their Kindle in, I'd be like, sure, bring it in. And one time this young lady was sitting across from my desk and she kind of leaned over and she was like, Miss Cafaro, what is happening here? And I kind of like took her Kindle and I read it. And I was like, well, I can't really explain it to you in detail. But this is something that happens during sex sometimes, and you are reading an adult romance book. So do with that what you will. Because again, she just had it on free on her Kindle and she didn't really know. And she blushed and she was so embarrassed and everything. But again, I tried not to like shame her or anything like that. Because again, I'm trying to build up like we read what we want. I was like, but caution. Um, and I have seen this with other teachers where they didn't know that they brought in a very steamy adult graphic romance book. They thought it was just kind of a cute little rom-com with hockey players and stuff. And they were like, had it in their library for like 7th and 8th graders. So again, I'm not saying like, let them just read whatever the heck they want, try to have conversation. And that's where like going around and talking to them is going to be helpful, because I would always just kind of love to wander and be like, well, what are you reading? How are you liking it? What's it about? So that way you're kind of keeping a tab on if anybody's reading anything that's like kind of questionable, especially for your age group. So kind of feel that out how you will. I do say that probably about 75% of the time, I was letting them just completely do it, whatever they chose, just free choice reading. However, sometimes I would kind of like suggest, be like, hey, this whole unit is on mythical heroes. So maybe you should try reading books that focus on heroes or mythology, the hero's journey, anything like that. And again, like this wasn't, I didn't do this too often, but it was just kind of like, hey, it would kind of go with what else we're reading and we're discussing and studying in this unit. So it would be really cool to kind of compare it with what you're reading. But I also did at least try to fit in at least one book club a semester. And so if we were doing a book club, that I would tell them, like you can use your independent reading time for whatever book it is you chose for the book club that goes with our unit. So again, like kind of figure out how it works for you. The main focus was making it consistent and making it every day. So yes, I would say most of the time it was read whatever you want, or, but then that small bit of time, it was like read whatever you want within these choices I've given you. And you can make it really fun. Like, again, when I was doing mythical heroes and things like that, one day I had pulled all the books I had from my library that even remotely had to do with it. And then they just kind of sat at whatever book kind of piqued their interest. And they got the first, like 5 minutes of class to check it out and see what they thought. I also coordinated with the media specialists, and they pulled everything that worked within it, and they came from all kinds of genres. So you can get really fun and exploratory with it too. And this is, again, another example of my in-class library. So you can see it wasn't super fancy, but I had at least, I would say, 100 books, if not more. It's kind of dwindled a little bit at the moment because I just went through 2 cross-country moves. But I also had more books over to the side that you can't see. All right, here's another thing I would definitely do all the time too, and it's setting the mood. you know, um, just making it like this really cozy, sacred time that was separate from the rest of class. So I often had, the lights are dimmed, there's a timer on the board. I usually had some like really pretty aesthetic on the board. There was ambient music playing. Sometimes I would take requests, like they would want Minecraft music, or they would want music from like a video game or something like that. So we would do that. I also had a point system. So if the class earned enough points on Fridays, they got to grab some hot chocolate or coffee or tea while they were doing their independent reading. Because as I told them, like nothing is better than sitting with a cup of coffee and enjoying your book. Um, so it was just extra incentives to just be really cozy and really, again, like having that joyous kind of connection to reading. It's not something sterile. It's not something being forced. It's something that we're making cozy and lovely and whatnot. So that always helped. So here are some examples of what I would pull up on YouTube. Again, just like some really fun, like something fun to watch on the screen. Like it wouldn't really move around too much. It might be like fairy lights and things like that and the ambient music, but it's beautiful. Now, sometimes you're going to be required to put a grade with it, right? It might be like it's how you kind of start out because you are trying again to reignite those atrophied muscles. And who doesn't love the fact that we got to have, a free personal pizza when we were kids after we read so many books? So you might need to do something grade wise, but I always made it very low stakes. So something that was kind of creative and fun and not torturous book book report type of thing. So, doing something like a don't read this book if you hate review. Like, don't read this book if you hate, strong heroines who learn about their magic and defeat wizards at the end of the day, whatever it is. Just to be kind of so like fun, have fun with the review. You could also have them create 15-second mood aesthetics, like we see on Instagram, where they say, like, read this book for these vibes, or read these books for, based on its aesthetics, that sort of thing. They can make dating profiles for the characters. Or if you want to go just really low key and just have like a check-in slip that they fill out once a week that has a different prompt each time. That's also really good. And some of these are included with your free ticket and then as well as your VIP class or VIP ticket. So again, I did this every single day, especially starting in like the second year of my teaching. And so here are the things that I saw, the benefits that I saw with my students. The joy definitely increased. Again, I had students who had not read books in years and years and years. And by the end, like they were so excited telling me how many books they had read that year. Some would come up to me during, getting the classes and everything the next year. And they were so excited to tell me how many books they read over the summer. I had parents who were telling me that they were so grateful because it was the first time they had seen their child read at home for pleasure in years, and it just brought them joy. So they were reconnecting on books too. Again, those muscles got super strong. The stamina increased, and their analysis skills increased, their vocabulary increased, all of it. So they also became more focused when it became time to be doing the classwork because I'd already given them time to what they wanted to read and what they wanted to focus on. I'm not a huge fan of standardized tests, or at least most of them. I think most of them kind of suck. But at the very least, even my admin saw value in what I was doing because my scores increased. The scores that, especially for vocabulary and comprehension on the standardized tests, increase. I know one year with my ninth graders, they saw like between 50 and 60% growth from the previous year when they took the same test. And that in that year, like I was teaching two SPED classes. So even they saw dramatic increases. So all of my students, whether they were SPED, whether they were ELL, on level, gifted, whatever it was, they all saw increases because the benefits are just clear. The studies tell us that all the time. But these are the things that I saw with my own eyes too over the last few years. And with that, I bring you to the close. Hopefully, this gives you some ideas on how to make reading something that's really sacred every day, and some ways to try to incorporate it and make it joyful. Um, you can find me also on Instagram and TikTok. I tend to be a little more active on TikTok right now. And that's something that's really surprising to me because it was my students who actually pushed me to get on TikTok a few years ago to talk about my teaching. I didn't want to, but now I'm on there all the time. So, anyway, I hope that you can join me and you can share if you are able to try any of this over the next year. I would love to hear how it goes. This is just something that brings me a lot of joy, and I hope it sparks something in your classroom too. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to connect with you later.